I thought my son's wedding would bring us closer. But after that day, he stopped calling. For months, I waited by the phone, wondering. When my son got married, I believed it would bring us even closer. I imagined Sunday dinners turning into family gatherings. I pictured phone calls filled with laughter, stories about his new life, and maybe one day, the sound of a baby crying in the background. I thought marriage would add to our bond. I never imagined it would erase me. After the wedding, my son stopped calling me at all. At first, I didn't panic. Newlyweds are busy. I understood that. Love is exciting. Life moves fast in the beginning. I told myself, give him time. He'll call. So I waited. Every morning I made my coffee and placed my phone on the table beside me. I kept the ringer turned all the way up. I didn't want to miss his call. I would sit there, watching the screen, hoping his name would appear, but the phone stayed silent. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. I started jumping at every sound. The microwave beep. A car door outside. Even the neighbor's dog barking made my heart race for a second. Maybe that's him, I'd think. But it never was. The last time we spoke, it was just a quick call. Only a few days after his honeymoon. His voice sounded happy but rushed. Mom, everything's great here. We're settling in. We'll talk soon. I smiled even though he couldn't see me. I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. I love you. I love you too, Mom. And that was it. No more calls after that. At first, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't complain. I just wondered what I had done wrong. Was it something I said at the wedding? Was I too emotional during my speech? Did I embarrass him somehow? Or maybe I had been too involved in his life before. Maybe I held on too tightly. Maybe I became a burden. Those thoughts crept into my mind late at night, when the house was quiet and the walls felt too big for one person. I live alone now, in the same small house where I raised him. The furniture hasn't changed much. The hallway still carries echoes of his footsteps. His old room is still there, untouched, like time stopped the day he left. Sometimes I walk past it and pause. I remember him as a little boy, running down that hallway in socks, sliding into the wall and laughing. I remember his backpack hanging by the door, his shoes kicked off in a careless pile. Now there is only silence. My name is Eleanor, but everyone calls me Ellie. I'm 68 years old, and my son, my only child, was my entire world. His father died when he was just 5 years old. One moment I had a husband and a family. The next I had a small boy holding my hand at a funeral, asking me when his dad was coming back. From that day on, it was just the two of us. I worked 2 jobs, one at a diner during the day, another cleaning offices at night. I was always tired, but I never let him see it. I wanted him to feel safe. I wanted him to feel loved. We cooked together. We did homework at the kitchen table. On Sundays, we went to the park. When he got taller than me, he'd push me on the swing and laugh like a child again. He was a good boy, a kind boy, and I was proud of him in ways words can describe. That's why the silence hurt so deeply. Because this isn't just about missed phone calls. It feels like I lost him twice. Once when his father died, and again when he chose a new life that no longer included me. Every morning, I still check my phone. Every night, I place it on the table beside my bed. I tell myself, tomorrow. But tomorrow keeps coming without his voice. And somewhere inside me, a quiet fear begins to grow. What if he isn't just busy? What if he doesn't need me anymore? And what if the woman he married helped him decide that? Before my son became a man who forgot to call, he was a tiny baby wrapped in a blue blanket. I was only 25 when Thomas was born. His father, John, stood beside me in that hospital room with tears in his eyes. He kept whispering, "He's perfect, Ellie. He's perfect." John was a mechanic, always smelling faintly of oil and soap, but he had the gentlest hands. When he held our son, His whole face softened. We didn't have much. A small house, a second-hand couch, old dishes that didn't match. But we had dreams. John used to say, one day he'll be bigger than both of us, and we'll tell him we built everything from nothing. For 5 years, life felt simple. Every evening, John would lift Thomas onto his shoulders and walk him around the block like he was showing him the world. Thomas would point at trees, birds, clouds, and shout, "Look, Daddy!" I would watch them from the porch, thinking, this is everything. Then one rainy night, everything ended. John was driving home from work. A truck skidded on the wet road. He never made it back. I still remember the knock on the door. 2 police officers stood there. Their faces told me the truth before their words did. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember falling. I only remember Thomas tugging at my hand and saying, "Mommy." Why are they here? At the funeral, he kept asking when his dad would wake up. I told him, "Daddy is in heaven now." He frowned. "Can he still see me?" I nodded even though my heart was breaking. That day, I became both mother and father. I didn't have time to fall apart. I had a little boy who depended on me for everything. So I got up every morning. I poured cereal, tied shoes, packed lunches, wiped tears. I worked at a diner during the day and cleaned offices at night. Sometimes I came home after midnight, my hands aching, my back stiff. Thomas would already be asleep, curled around his pillow. I'd sit on the edge of his bed and brush his hair with my fingers. "I'm here," I'd whisper. "I always will be." And I meant it. He grew up knowing only me. When he was scared, he came to me. When he was sick, I stayed awake. When he was proud, he showed me first. On his first day of school, he held my hand so tightly it hurt. "Don't leave, Mom," he said. "I'll always come back," I promised. Every afternoon, I stood by the school gate. Every single day, rain or shine. When he ran into my arms, I felt like I mattered in this world. We became a team. We cooked dinner together. He would stand on a chair and stir the pot while I guided his hands. We talked about his day, about the kids who teased him, about the books he loved. We laughed a lot. We didn't have money, but we had love. When he wanted a bicycle, I worked extra shifts. When he wanted a science kit, I skipped buying myself new shoes. He never knew how much I gave up. I never wanted him to. All I wanted was for him to feel supported, protected, loved. As he grew older, he became taller, smarter, stronger. He joined teams, made friends, learned independence. I was proud, but I also felt him drifting just a little. That's what growing up looks like, I told myself. When he left for college, I stood in his empty room and cried for the first time in years. But he called me every Sunday. "Hi, Mom." That voice kept me going. So when the calls stopped after his wedding, it didn't just feel like distance. It felt like history was repeating itself. First, I lost my husband without warning. Now I was losing my son. Slowly, quietly, without explanation. And I couldn't help wondering, had all those years of sacrifice built a bond? Or had they built a chain he was finally breaking? Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy. By the time he reached high school, he was taller than me. His voice had deepened. He carried himself with confidence, the kind that comes from knowing you're capable of more than the world expects. He loved science. He filled his room with little experiments, wires, magnets, jars of strange liquids. I didn't always understand what he was building, but I admired the way his eyes lit up when something worked. I saved every dollar I could so he could have what he needed. When he earned a scholarship to college, I cried the entire drive home. Not because I was sad, because I was proud. The day I drove him to campus, his dorm room smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. I helped him make the bed, straightened the curtains, put his books on the shelf. He hugged me tightly. "Call me every week, okay?" I said. "I will, Mom, I promise." And he did every Sunday without fail. We talked for hours about his classes, his friends, the cafeteria food he hated, the professors he admired. Sometimes he just let me listen while he paced his room, thinking out loud. Those calls kept my house alive. I would sit at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, smiling at nothing while he spoke. Even when he graduated and moved to the city for work, he still called. He'd visit on holidays, carrying a bag of laundry and a craving for home-cooked meals. We'd sit on the porch at night watching the stars. "You're the best, Mom," he'd say. And I believed we were forever. Then he met Sarah. He told me about her on one of our Sunday calls. "She's smart, Mom, and funny. I think she's special." His voice sounded different, lighter, hopeful. I was happy for him. When he brought her home for the first time, I cooked his favorite roast. I wanted everything to be perfect. Sarah was polite, pretty, well-spoken, from a big family that laughed easily. Thomas looked at her the way his father once looked at me. And in that moment, I realized something had changed. Not badly. Just differently. As their relationship grew, the calls became shorter. Sometimes he forgot. Sometimes he rescheduled. "Sorry, Mom, we had plans." "I understand," I said, and I meant it. Love deserves space. But slowly the silence stretched. He missed a Mother's Day call once. "I forgot," he said. I laughed it off. "It's okay. Life is busy." But a quiet ache settled in my chest. When he told me he was going to propose, I cried with joy. We planned the wedding together. I helped pick flowers, tasted cakes. I imagined gaining a daughter. I thought marriage would expand our family. I didn't realize it would redefine it. By the time the wedding day arrived, I was already feeling slightly outside his world. Not pushed out, just no longer centered. I told myself this was normal. A mother must learn to step back. What I didn't know was that I was stepping into a future where my voice would slowly fade from his daily life. A future where love still existed, but connection would become rare, and where a mother who once mattered most would begin to feel optional. Part 4. The wedding day arrived wrapped in sunlight and soft music. The church was filled with flowers. White ribbons lined the pews. Guests smiled, whispered, laughed. Everything looked exactly the way it should. Thomas stood at the altar in his dark suit, tall and confident. When he saw me walk in, his eyes softened for a moment, the way they used to when he was little. I felt that familiar warmth in my chest. He's still my boy, I told myself. Sarah entered in white, glowing. Her family watched proudly. My heart swelled as I imagined becoming part of that world. During the ceremony, Thomas glanced at me once and smiled. I held on to that smile. At the reception, music filled the room. People danced. Glasses clinked. Laughter floated through the air. When it was my turn to speak, my hands trembled. I raised Thomas alone, I said. He has been my greatest gift. Today I don't lose a son. I gain a daughter. Some guests wiped their eyes. Thomas hugged me. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. We shared a slow dance. His hands rested lightly on my back. For a moment I felt like nothing had changed. But around us, I began to notice small things. Sarah's family surrounded the head table. I was placed a little farther away. During photos, I waited while everyone else went first. No one was rude. No one was unkind. Yet I felt invisible. After the honeymoon, I expected life to settle. I sent a message. "How are you settling in?" No reply. I sent another a week later. "Miss you?" Nothing. I told myself they were busy. New home, new routines. Still, I checked my phone every morning. Still, I waited. The silence didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly. A missed call here. A delayed response there. A promise to talk soon that never came. And slowly I realized the wedding wasn't the beginning of a new chapter. It was the closing of the one where I mattered most. Silence has a sound. It's the hum of the refrigerator in the middle of the night. It's the ticking of the clock when you're wide awake at 3 a.m. It's the echo of your own footsteps in a house that once felt alive. After the wedding, my home began to feel larger than it ever had before. Every room held a memory. The kitchen where Thomas once stood on a chair to stir soup. The hallway where he ran with socks sliding across the floor. The living room where we watched movies on Friday nights, sharing popcorn from the same bowl. Now, Those rooms just watched me. I started eating dinner alone at the table. One plate, one glass, one chair pulled out. At first, I told myself it was temporary. He's busy. He's adjusting. He'll call. But weeks passed. Then months. The phone never rang. Sometimes I picked it up just to make sure it still worked. I checked the signal, restarted it. I even called my neighbor once. Just to hear it ring, it did. So, I knew the problem wasn't the phone. It was me. Or at least, that's what it began to feel like. I replayed every moment of the wedding in my mind. Did I hug him too tightly? Did I talk too much? Did my speech embarrass him? I wondered if Sarah saw me as a reminder of a life he was trying to leave behind. Past he no longer needed. Friends told me. Children grow up. This is normal. But this didn't feel normal. This felt like erasure. I would type messages and delete them. Before sending. Just thinking of you. Delete. Hope you're doing well. Delete. I miss you. Delete. What if I annoyed him? What if reaching out pushed him further away? So I stayed quiet. I filled my days with small routines. Morning walks, library visits, gardening in the backyard. I planted flowers over Buddy's old resting place, our dog who had grown old with us. I talked to those flowers like they could hear me. At night, I sat in my chair with a blanket and watched old home videos. Thomas at 6 missing his front teeth. Thomas at 12 scoring his first goal. Thomas at 18 hugging me before leaving for college. Each smile felt like a whisper from another lifetime. I wondered if he ever thought about those days, if he ever missed me, or if I had quietly become someone from his past. Someone he loved, but no longer needed. And that thought hurt more than any argument ever could. Because you can fight with someone who still sees you. But what do you do when someone simply stops looking back? There comes a moment when waiting becomes heavier than acting. For months I had lived inside quiet hope. I told myself that one day my phone would ring, and everything would return to normal. I imagined his voice saying, "Mom, I'm sorry. Life got away from me." But hope can turn into a kind of slow ache. One afternoon, after another morning of silence, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my phone. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I typed his number. Then I stopped. What if he didn't answer? What if he sounded annoyed? What if I heard in his voice that I no longer belonged in his world? The fear of rejection felt worse than loneliness. So I hung up. Days passed again. The garden bloomed. The seasons shifted. And still, nothing. That's when I made a decision. If he wouldn't come back to me, I would go to him. I baked his favorite pie. Apple with cinnamon and a flaky crust. The kind I used to make when he came home from school hungry. The kind he once said tasted like comfort. Wrapped it carefully and placed it on the passenger seat. The drive to the city took 2 hours. 2 hours of memories. His first bicycle. His first heartbreak. The way he used to fall asleep in the car with his mouth slightly open. I arrived at his apartment building with my heart pounding. I stood at the door for a long moment, rehearsing what I would say. Just a quick visit. Just a hello. Just a reminder that I'm still here. I knocked. The door opened and Sarah stood there. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Ellie, what are you doing here?" I smiled gently. "I brought pie for Thomas." She hesitated. "He's not home. He's at work." "Oh," I said softly. "I can wait." Her pause was barely a second, but I felt it. "We're busy today," she said. That word, busy, felt like a closed gate. Just then I heard footsteps. Thomas appeared in the hallway. "Mom." His voice wasn't warm. It wasn't cold. It was distant. He hugged me. But it felt careful, like he was unsure how close to hold me. We sat for a few minutes in their living room. The conversation was polite, shallow. I finally gathered the courage to ask what had been breaking me from the inside. "Why haven't you called me?" He sighed. "Mom, life is busy. Sarah and I need time alone." Sarah nodded. "We have our own family now. Our own family." The words landed gently, and still cut deeply. I swallowed. "I understand," I said. And I meant it. I stood, handed him the pie, and walked out. I didn't cry until I reached my car. That day I stopped waiting, because I finally understood. He hadn't forgotten me. He had moved forward, and I had been left behind. The drive home felt longer than the drive there. Every mile carried the weight of what I had just learned. He hadn't lost my number. He hadn't been too busy. He hadn't simply forgotten. He had chosen a life where I was no longer central, and perhaps that was normal. But knowing something is natural doesn't make it painless. When I returned home, I placed my keys on the table and stood in the doorway, staring at the quiet rooms. For the first time, I saw them clearly, not as waiting spaces, but as empty ones. That night, I lay in bed replaying his words. We have our own family now. I wondered where that left me. Was I still family? Or had I become something else? Something secondary? In the weeks that followed, I stopped reaching out. No texts, no calls, no small check-ins. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that love can feel like pressure when someone is trying to build a new world. So I learned how to disappear gently. I learned how to walk through my days without expecting anything. I volunteered at the community center. I helped children with their reading. I joined a knitting group with women who also carried quiet stories in their eyes. We never talked about loneliness, but we all recognized it. Sometimes I caught myself imagining Thomas at dinner with Sarah. Did he laugh the way he used to? Did he talk about his day? Did he ever think of me when he passed a bakery window? I didn't want to be a shadow in his life. I didn't want to be someone he felt guilty about. So I practiced letting go. But letting go isn't a clean break. It's 1,000 small moments where your heart reaches out, and you pull it back. At the grocery store, I passed the cereal he loved. In winter, I saw gloves in his favorite color. On his birthday, I stared at a card I never sent. I whispered happy birthday to the empty room. That was my gift. Silence. Months passed. Then a year. I told myself I was okay. I told myself I was strong. But strength is sometimes just a quiet way of surviving. And deep inside, I still carried a question I never asked aloud. Will I always be the one who steps back? Or will there come a day when he steps toward me again? It was raining the morning my phone rang. Not the gentle kind of rain, but the heavy, gray kind that darkens the sky and makes the world feel smaller. I was standing by the window watching drops slide down the glass. When I heard it, my phone. For a moment, I didn't move. It had been so long since anyone called that the sound felt foreign, almost unreal. I looked at the screen. Thomas. My heart forgot how to beat. I answered, my voice barely steady. Hello? There was a pause on the other end. Then quietly, Mom, are you okay? The question stunned me. Yes, I said. Why? He exhaled. I could hear the weight in his breath. I was in a car accident. The room tilted. I'm fine, he added quickly. It wasn't bad. Just a scare. But when it happened, all I could think about was you. I closed my eyes. In that moment, every wall I had built to protect myself cracked. They asked who I wanted to call, he said. And I realized I hadn't talked to you in so long, and that felt wrong. My voice trembled. Are you hurt? No, just shaken. We were quiet together. Not an awkward silence, a full one. The kind that carries everything words cannot. I didn't mean to push you away, he finally said. I just didn't know how to balance two worlds. I understood that, but understanding doesn't erase pain. I never wanted to be in the way. I said softly, You're not in the way. He replied, You're my mother. The word mother wrapped around me like a blanket. He asked if he could come see me. I said yes without hesitation. When he arrived, he looked older than I remembered. Tired, human. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he once did homework. I thought growing up meant letting go, he said. But I didn't realize I was letting go of you. I reached across the table and held his hand. You were building a life, I said. That's not wrong. But leaving you behind was... That afternoon we talked like we hadn't in years. Not about the wedding. Not about blame. Just about life. And for the first time since he walked down that aisle, I felt something return. Not the past, but possibility. The next few weeks were filled with careful steps. Thomas called more often. Short at first, then longer. He shared stories about work, about Sarah, about little things that reminded him of me. Like how I used to make his favorite pancakes on Sunday mornings. When he visited, he didn't hug me the same way he once did. That was gone. But there was something else. Respect, recognition, and a quiet apology in his eyes. We sat in my living room one evening, the rain tapping against the windows again, and he finally said the words I had waited years to hear. Mom, I see now what I've done. I didn't realize how my silence hurt you. I held back tears. I wanted to say so many things. How much it hurt. How lonely I had felt. But I didn't. Instead, I said softly, I understand, Thomas. You were building your own family. I couldn't step in the way you needed to grow. He shook his head. No, I didn't mean to exclude you. Sarah, she wanted us to have our own space. And I let that distance grow, without realizing what it was doing to you. The words were painful and healing at the same time. We talked for hours, not about blame, not about anger, but about love, about memories, about what mattered, about letting the past mistakes become lessons, not chains. That day I realized something crucial. Forgiveness isn't just about the other person. It's about giving yourself the freedom to keep loving, even if it looks different than before. Thomas and I walked through the old neighborhood the next morning, the air crisp and fresh. We stopped by the park where I used to push him on the swing. He laughed softly when he saw the old swing set. I miss this, he said. I know, I replied. I do too. It wasn't the same as before. Our lives had changed. But it was something new, something stronger, perhaps because it had been tested. Later, Sarah joined us. The tension from before was replaced with cautious warmth. She smiled genuinely this time, and I could see that she loved my son and, in her own way, respected me too. That evening, Thomas held my hand and whispered, I want you in my life, not just as a memory, but as part of what we're building. I smiled, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. The months that followed felt like a gentle sunrise after a long, cold night. Thomas called more often, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Each conversation was a reminder that love doesn't vanish. It only changes shape. Then one day, the news came that would forever change the rhythm of our lives. Mom, Thomas said over the phone, voice trembling with excitement. Sarah and I are expecting. My heart stopped. Joy, surprise, and a flicker of fear all collided at once. A grandchild. A piece of him to love and guide, just as I had with Thomas. When I visited a few weeks later, I held Sarah's belly and felt a tiny kick. Thomas watched me, and his eyes filled with gratitude. I'm sorry for all the distance, he said quietly. Thomas, I replied, you're not lost to me. You just needed your life. The baby's arrival brought a quiet miracle. We named him John, after his grandfather. Holding him for the first time, I felt the weight of the months and years melt away. Thomas watched, leaning close. Want to see him first? He asked. Yes, I whispered. The tiny hands wrapped around my finger. And in that moment, I realized something I had known all along. Love endures, even through silence, even through mistakes. Sarah smiled softly. Thank you for being here. I nodded. I wouldn't be anywhere else. Over the next weeks, our bond grew again, slowly but surely. Visits became regular, calls less hurried. Laughter returned to the home that once felt too quiet. And I learned a vital lesson. Patience, forgiveness, and quiet strength are not just words. They are ways of holding on to love when life tries to stretch it thin. That day, looking at Thomas and little John, I whispered a silent promise. I will love you, always. Even if life changes, even if time passes, even if silence falls, because family is never truly gone. The journey from loneliness to healing wasn't quick. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And in that reality, I found peace. I may have felt forgotten. I may have been pushed aside, but I was never unloved. And as I watched my grandson's small hand reach for Thomas, and Thomas smile at me with recognition and gratitude, I knew. Some bonds once formed are forever. The moment I held John, my grandson, for the very first time, a flood of memories came rushing back. I remembered Thomas as a baby, his tiny fingers clutching mine, his first steps, his little laugh echoing through our small house. Time had passed, but the love I felt for him never faded. "Look at him, Mom," Thomas said softly, watching us. "He's got your eyes." I smiled through tears, my heart full in a way I hadn't felt in months. This little boy, so fragile, so alive, was a bridge between the past and the present. A reminder that love endures, even when it's tested. For hours, I rocked him gently, humming lullabies I had sung to Thomas. Sarah watched quietly, a soft smile on her face, finally letting me into their new little world. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is, but it was enough. Enough to heal the cracks in our hearts. Enough to show me that even after months of distance, love can grow again. Watching John's tiny hands curl around my finger, I realized something powerful. Life gives second chances, sometimes in ways you never expect. And for the first time in a long time, my heart felt truly at peace. The weeks after meeting John for the first time were quiet, but healing. Slowly, life found a new rhythm. Sunday brunches became our little tradition. Thomas called more often, not just to talk about work, but to share small, silly moments, like John's first funny laugh, or the way he clumsily tried to stand on his own. Each call reminded me that even though things had changed, our bond was still there, just in a different form. Sarah began inviting me over more too. At first, her smiles felt cautious, polite, but over time they became warm and genuine. Watching her care for Thomas and John, I realized she wasn't taking my son away. She was giving him a life, and I was now part of it, in a new way. We learned to communicate differently. No long lectures, no silent heartbreak, just patience, understanding and quiet acceptance. John grew quickly, as little children do. His first crawl, first laugh, first word, all became moments of joy for all of us. The house, once so quiet after Thomas's silence, was now filled with laughter, tiny footsteps, and the soft hum of family life. And while nothing was perfect, there was warmth, connection, and a gentle sense of belonging returning to my heart. One quiet evening I sat by the window, John asleep in my arms, Thomas beside me. I thought about all the months of silence, the missed calls, and the ache that had filled my heart. But in that stillness, I realized something important. Love doesn't need constant contact, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means letting go of the hurt that weighs you down. "I'm sorry, Mom," Thomas said softly, breaking the quiet. "I should have called sooner. I should have been more mindful." I smiled, tears slipping down my cheeks. "I know, Thomas. We've learned, and that's enough. Love grows, even when it stretches across distance and silence." As I looked at John, reaching for my hand and clutching it with tiny fingers, a sense of peace washed over me. Life wasn't perfect. Our past had been full of pain, misunderstanding, and longing. But it had also taught us patience, strength, and the power of love that endures. From that day on, our family found a new rhythm. Sunday visits, phone calls, small moments of laughter. They weren't constant, but they were meaningful. I realized that even when bonds are tested, they rarely break completely. They bend, stretch, and sometimes feel fragile. But love and forgiveness always have a way of bringing them back together. Holding John close, I whispered softly, "Life moves forward, and so do we." And for the first time in a long time, my heart felt whole again. The silence that had once haunted me was now replaced with the gentle sounds of a family slowly healing, growing, and learning to love in new ways.